Hi everyone, welcome to Wabi Sabi, presented by Unbottled Emotions. Wabi Sabi literally translates to the idea of beauty in imperfections. It stems from an ancient aesthetic philosophy rooted in Zen Buddhism. It very well encapsulates what the idea behind the podcast is. So, it essentially is about pursuing the various facets of mental health, which A might be too mystifying for people or might be too out there for people to even want to understand, but also about various linkages and intersections that exist within mental health, which aren't talked about in mainstream psychology. We also hope to share more about social emotional learning through this podcast in the future and dive into the spirals people are too afraid to talk about. Today, we have something very, very interesting because we're going to be talking about mental health and law, and specifically about the Mental Health Care Act 2017. So, the speaker that we have today is going to introduce that act better than me, probably. I'm just going to introduce them. So, today we have Arjun Kapoor. Arjun's a program manager and research fellow at the Center for Mental Health Law and Policy. He is a trained lawyer and a psychologist, which I find absolutely brilliant, and works at the intersection of law and policy reform, mental health, and suicide prevention in India. This is something that I haven't seen a lot of people do. And he's currently working with a range of stakeholders on implementation of the Mental Health Care Act 2017 and the National Mental Health Policy 2014. And he also provides technical support to the Suicide Prevention and Implementation Research Initiative for program implementation, capacity building, and public engagement. Hi Arjun, so good to have you here, especially after the reviews we got from the internship and the kind of information people got from our session with you.
Hi, Devyani. Thanks a ton for that really sweet introduction. Really excited to be here. And yeah, really looking forward to our conversation.
Great. So, I mean, if I were someone who didn't, which I wasn't till still very recently, someone who doesn't know the basics about Mental Health Care Act or even the legality, the legal terms, etc. of it, how would you explain it to me?
Okay, so the Mental Health Care Act is essentially a law which regulates mental health care and treatment in India. Okay. The Mental Health Care Act of 2017 does two particular things. One is that it protects the rights of persons with mental illness. So, if a person with mental illness is undergoing mental health care and treatment, then what are their rights? How should they be provided treatment? And what are some of the procedures and compliances that mental health professionals should be following in order to ensure that the treatment and care that's provided to the person is in accordance with their rights. The second thing that the Mental Health Care Act does is that it recognizes and provides for the right to access mental health care and treatment, right? Which basically means that it places a whole lot of obligations on the central and the state governments in India to ensure that people have access to mental health care treatment, facilities, and other forms of care. I'm sure all of you or your viewers would be aware of the fact that mental health care services in India are, in a sense, quite minimal in terms of the provision of mental health care services. Accessing them is extremely, extremely difficult. We don't have enough services, we don't have enough mental health professionals. And given the population of our country, just in 2017, a study in the Lancet said that there were about 190 million people in India who had some form of a mental health problem or a mental illness, right? So that's like a huge number of people that we're talking about. Whereas just about 70 to 90% of them actually have no access to any form of mental health care and treatment. So that's really what the Mental Health Care Act does. If you wanted me to summarize it in like 2 minutes, 2 minutes.
Yeah. Someone with a short attention span like me would love that description of it. But yeah, no, I think that definitely encapsulates it, and we have the whole of the rest of the time to get into the depths of it. So, I mean, apart from accessibility issues, is there something in the way mental illness is defined in the act, or the way mental health and illness is categorized in the act, that restricts certain people. Because I have heard this criticism in psychology before, that the way we have disorders written and the way we have illnesses written, it restricts it from a lot of people who might be on the spectrum as well. So I'm not sure if I'm completely explaining the question, but do you understand, or do you get what I mean?
No, I totally get your question, and I've encountered this question before also. So let me try and give it a shot, and then we could see. So, in order to answer that question, I would first sort of kind of bring up the whole concept of mental health itself. Okay, so if you looked at mental health as a spectrum, okay, on the one end, you have extremely positive mental health and well-being, and on the other end of the spectrum, you have mental ill health, right? So somebody who's has poor mental health or ill health, right? Now, on this spectrum, you if you start from the positive mental health sort of end, you will sort of see that, okay, all of us on a daily basis experience some kind of stress or the other, right? That's a natural part of our lives, right? So anxiety is something which is very, very natural to human beings, and that stress could come for all kinds of reasons. For example, I have a deadline tomorrow, right? Or I have to write an exam, right? Now, if you move a little ahead on that spectrum, you then come to a set of experiences which one could call distress, right? Now, distress is essentially, when you experience some kind of a crisis in your life, right? It could be any kind. You could have a breakup, or you could have financial difficulties, or you could lose a loved one. So there are various kinds of life experiences and life crises that we all sort of experience throughout, right? And our response to that is often in a distress way. So distress is essentially a response to any life crisis that we experience in our lives, right? And it's quite natural for us to experience some kind of a mental health problem. So you could be feeling low, we could be feeling sort of extremely anxious, there could be a period of grief. So there are various ways in distress also gets expressed. Now, if you move a little more ahead towards the end of the spectrum, you have some conditions which kind of become so serious and so intense that they start showing symptoms which are of a clinical significance, right? And the outcome of that is you might feel dysfunctional, you might not be able to do things which you were otherwise used to, and you start experiencing symptoms which are of a certain intensity and of a certain duration, right? Now, mental illness essentially belongs to this category, right? Where people experience certain conditions or mental health problems which are clinically significant, right? And lead to some kind of distress or dysfunction which we can't handle on our own. Through our own support systems. And we might need some kind of specialized intervention or help, say, from a psychiatrist or a counselor or a therapist. So that's what really mental illness is about. And in terms of mental health as a concept, mental illness forms one part of it, right? And people who have an actual mental illness are a certain probably minority or a certain percentage of the entire sort of group of people who experience stress, distress, and other mental health problems. Now, the Mental Health Care Act is specifically focused on the category of mental illnesses. Okay, and it says that if you have to diagnose or determine that a person has mental illness, then you have to do it in accordance with medical standards, which are either internationally or nationally accepted as valid medical standards. So I'll give you an example of two such medical standards. The first one is known as the Diagnostics and Statistics Manual, which is published by the American Psychiatric Association. And the other is the International Classification of Diseases, which the World Health Organization sort of publishes. And these manuals essentially contain a list of what you call quote unquote mental disorders and the list of symptoms and parameters through which any kind of a mental health professional needs to sort of diagnose and determine that this person has this particular condition or disorder or illness. So the Mental Health Care Act is concerned only with mental illnesses which are serious enough and require specialized mental health care and treatment, right? Now, the question is, does this exclude a whole range of other people who have mental health problems? In a sense, no, because the ICD and the DSM are manuals which have been followed all across the world, and they've usually been the two dominant medical standards, which have been followed by the psychiatric establishment, right? So any condition or a mental health problem which is clinically significant is included in the DSM and the ICD. And in fact, there is a lot of controversy around that, and rightfully so, because the critique of these medical standards is that they tend to include far too many conditions, which can be seen as ordinary expressions of distress or natural expressions of distress that any person would experience given the life circumstances that they're going through. Right. So in that sense, the DSM and the ICD contain a long list of conditions. The problem with including conditions which are sort of ordinary distress or stress is that you end up over pathologizing people's experiences in life, and that's not a good thing, right? If I'm feeling anxious about an exam tomorrow or a deadline, or if I'm feeling the pain of having lost a loved one, these are very natural responses to these kinds of life experiences or crises or events. Or for example, even the COVID pandemic now, a lot of us are feeling a range of emotions, right? These are natural responses to the conditions that we are living in. So to over pathologize those and to call them illness or a disorder, it's not right to over pathologize every experience of stress or distress in our lives, right? Which is why the Mental Health Care Act says that it focuses purely on mental illness. And that's not to say that people who are experiencing stress or distress shouldn't receive the support that they need. Of course they need to, right? And that's what mental health is all about. But the point is that you can't treat them as clinical illnesses or disorders, because then you end up over pathologizing the individual. That's not a direction that we should be moving in. If we really want to address mental health in all of its sort of social, cultural, and economic determinants and factors which affect mental health.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, it's becoming rampant. And while I understand the need to label, I also think that these what we call natural, let unbottle and write up, and we've been saying that for a while, but they've become negative for people and they've become unbearable for them. Like even the thought of distress and grief. And this is something interesting, that there's a whole debate which really spoke to me, where they talked about how some people's response to grief, they were very quick to recover. I mean, they recovered in a very short amount of time, and this was considered as a pathology, because in recovery you're supposed to take a set amount of time, or you're supposed to be sad for longer, because that's how it's supposed to be by certain standards. And when it was not met, it was labeled as a pathology. But later, I mean, it still is being contested about how this differs. So, I mean, in the same line of thought, like how much do you think Western standards or standards of set by the DSM and like the ICD have influenced the MHCA Act? And since Western standards focus on individualistic characteristics, and most of us know about this, does this act also lean towards more individualistic things rather than the focus on families and the contribution of caregivers, family support, etc.?
So, Devani, I've again heard this criticism of the Mental Health Care Act in general, that it's a Western import, and that it follows Western constructs because of its focus on individuality. And I really don't understand this critique, and I'll tell you why. You see, we've got a constitution, right? Now, the Constitution of India, when it was being drafted, and Baba Sahib Ambedkar, when he was the chairman of the drafting committee, and when he was sort of drafting the Constitution, he actually wrote about the fact that the fundamental unit of the Constitution is actually the individual. He was very against holding the community or the village, as Gandhi wanted at that time, to be the fundamental unit of the Constitution. And his whole idea was, given that we live in a caste society, right, and given the fact that there are such deep caste hierarchies which are so prevalent, especially in rural areas, and we're clearly seeing an example of that right now in Hathras. So making the village or the community per se, let's take the community as the unit of the Constitution, can actually be very, very problematic, right? Because of
Mhm.
this very caste society that we live in. So Baba Sahib Ambedkar wanted to keep the individual as the unit of the constitution, which basically meant that the individual's autonomy, right, the individual's freedom, and the individual's dignity and liberty are paramount. These are fundamental rights. So now the point is that if people have a problem with this whole notion of Western construct because it equates it to the individual, then they should actually be questioning the constitution as well, because the constitution has the individual as the unit, as its unit, right?
Hmm.
And what the Mental Health Care Act does is, and if you look at its provisions, it's only sort of trying to uphold the principles of the constitution by recognizing the autonomy of the individual, recognizing the fact that an individual must have the right and the freedom to make choices about their own
Yeah.
life, to make decisions about their own life, and to respect their rights, like especially persons with mental illness who are
Hmm.
ever so often considered to be irrational, violent, criminal, and all those kinds of sort of stereotypes and prejudices which are completely false. So that's really the point of it. That the MHC in that sense is trying to focus on protecting the rights of the individual, which is really and preventing any kind of discrimination. I think that's very, very important, because the heart of our constitution is the chapter on fundamental rights, which prohibits any form of discrimination, right? So I really don't understand what is this sort of critique of Western notions because we are too individual. That's really not the case.
Yeah.
Because individual rights is something which are now recognized across all liberal democracies, and we're a liberal democracy.
On the flip side, like given that we're respecting the individual's autonomy, and given that so many problems exist in the community level with regards to caste, religion, all of these issues, is it also not reductive to only focus on the individual and not the socio-cultural surroundings around them, or like does the act not cater to that? I mean, I'm talking about how how social psychology looks at the person's surroundings, and even community psychology looks around the person and like then goes about the analysis. So don't you think that just to focus on the individual can turn out to be reductive, especially in mental health?
Well, actually not, because if you look at the Mental Health Care Act's sort of one of its fundamental principles, guiding principles, is the whole idea of community rehabilitation and community care.
Hmm.
So the Mental Health Care Act actually is trying to make a shift towards deinstitutionalization, and what it says is that instances of admitting persons in mental health hospitals should be the least restrictive care option, right? Which basically means that before you come and admit a person in a mental health hospital, you should exhaust every alternative form of mental health care treatment and support in the community, right? And in
Right.
fact, one of the rights recognized in the Mental Health Care Act is the right to community living, right? Which means that every person with mental illness has a right to not be segregated or excluded from their community. So, community living, community care, home based rehabilitation are fundamental sort of features of the Mental Health Care Act. And in fact, when we speak about the right to access mental health care, the Act very clearly asking both the central and the state governments to ensure that there are enough community rehabilitation facilities in each state, in each district, so that people, especially in rural areas who don't have access to mental health care and treatment, should also have access to these facilities, where they can be rehabilitated or provided care and support in the community itself, rather than kind of forcefully admitting them in mental health institutions or establishments. So, in that sense, the Mental Health Care Act sort of focus is on community mental health care and treatment, whereas any form of institutionalization, as you call it, should be the least restrictive option after you've exhausted every other option in the community.
I want to go back to how you spoke about the family and how it gives a lot of liberty to the individual who has the mental health issue or illness. So there is also a facet of nominated representative within the Mental Health Care Act. So it talks about how that person, because they're nominated, they can have access to unlimited information about the patient's illness. So under what conditions will that be done, and what is the kind of information that they're permitted to give?
Right. So the nominated representative Devyani is essentially a person who a person with mental illness appoints, to represent in matters of their mental health care and treatment. So which includes providing them support while they're receiving mental health care and treatment, taking decisions on their behalf in case the person is unable to take decisions on their own, and a range of other sort of responsibilities and duties that nominated representatives have. Now, given the fact that in India, we all know that families play a central role in an individual's life, right? Fortunately or unfortunately, and I say unfortunately because we also know that families are the first site of violence that individuals experience. Families can be incredibly violent. So it's a bit of a double-edged sword over here as far as the family is concerned. But the sociological reality is that families are central when it comes to an individual's life, especially for persons with mental illness. So invariably, a person who would appoint their nominated representative would be a person from their family, right? It would be a family member or a relative or a caregiver who's associated with the family. And I don't think the Mental Health Care Act is such a potent legislation that it can change the fundamental social structure of Indian society, which is to kind of make the family redundant or irrelevant.
Yeah.
Because people often make this argument as well. They say that, oh, you're giving too much importance to the individual, so what happens to the family's rights? The family doesn't have any rights over here. It's the individual who has rights, because they're the one who are having a mental illness and experiencing discrimination of whatever kind. So I don't think the Mental Health Care Act in any way negates the role of the family, because invariably most people would appoint family members as their nominated representatives. I think it's important specifically for people who experience violence and abuse at the hands of their families, and whose mental health issues or problems are probably sort of caused by the families themselves, and who have alternative people in their lives who they would like to appoint as their nominated representatives. So let me give you an example of, say, LGBTQ communities, right? Or trans persons who are often abandoned by their families, or sort of, kind of thrown out of their homes.
Yeah.
And of course, some hijra communities also have their own family systems, right?
Yeah.
So the beauty of the nominated representative sort of provision is that it allows people who have been rejected by their families, or excluded, or being consistently abused by their families, to appoint anyone else that they trust, that they trust and have confidence in, and feel that, okay, this person will represent me the way I want to be, will take decisions on behalf of me if required, in accordance with what I would like. And also because this person understands, this person understands where I come from, they understand my wishes and desires, they understand my experience, or the things that I've gone through my life. So they will be in a better position to be able to provide me support and take decisions for me. And also because I'd probably be more comfortable and feel more safe with this person around me. In terms of information, so one of the rights that persons with mental illness have under the Act is to, first of all, be provided with information about what mental illness they have been diagnosed with, right?
Yeah.
And if they're being admitted in the institution, then under what provisions of the law are they being admitted? What kind of treatment is being proposed? What are the risks and benefits or alternatives to that form of treatment? What happens if they decide not to take that treatment? What if they want a different kind of treatment? So they have these fundamental rights to know some of these important bits of information. And also the fact that if they have been admitted, say without their consent, then they always have the right to file a complaint with the institutional mechanism against a decision to admit them, or if they've experienced any rights violations, then that they have the right to go and file a complaint regarding that. So that's a fundamental right which persons with mental illness have under the Mental Health Care Act, and in that sense, that information can be provided directly to the person themselves. However, if they are in a situation or a condition where they might require support to understand that information, or to really truly grasp what that information means, then it's the duty of the NR to provide them that support and to explain it to them in a manner that they would understand.
Okay, I think I was taking NRs to be in my general pessimistic way, where I feel like, you know, how easy it is in India to have a breach of confidentiality. Like, I mean, so many people from the community that I know have been to psychologists, psychiatrists who have very openly, I mean, they've breached the whole contract of confidentiality, and they've just gone ahead and told people in their family. And I feel like even with this, even with as many changes as we get, like you said, it's very difficult to change the structure. It's very difficult to change how bad and how easily bad things can go in India's mental health space. Like, I mean, do you get what I mean? I mean,
Absolutely. And listen, I think we have to understand one thing, and that's probably one of the reasons why we have mental health law, such a thing as mental health law in the first place, is because the whole issue of mental health, mental illness, mental health care and treatment is about power equations. Okay. And there are
yeah,
multiple power equations at play over here. There's the family, okay, there's the state, there's the mental health establishment, there are mental health professionals. Within that, there are differentials with, a psychiatrist power vis-a-vis a psychologist power. So there are various players over here who have different sort of power differentials. So often what happens in this entire process, it's the person with the mental illness who's facing the brunt of it all from all ends, from the
yeah,
family, from the mental health establishment, from the community because of the stigma and the exclusion, often from the state and the law, because when the law itself doesn't allow persons with mental illness or discriminates against them or denies them certain fundamental socioeconomic or civil political rights. So in that sense, the person with the mental illness is at the receiving end from all from each of these stakeholders. So what mental health law essentially does is to kind of balance those power differentials while ensuring that the person is receiving the mental health care and treatment that they require, and that if there are any kind of curtailment of their liberties, say for example in the situation where an admission might be made against their consent, then that such admissions have to be made in accordance with certain safeguards, right? And that there needs to be some kind of a legal process by which these decisions can be challenged. If a person is unhappy with the admission decision, then they should be able to go and challenge that, or their family members should be able to go and challenge that, so on and so forth. Under the new law, families are expected to make a huge change in the way that they engage with their loved ones, right? Which means that they need to provide care and support in a way where they're no longer taking decisions on behalf of the person or quote unquote in their best interests, but actually creating an environment where the person is able to take the decision on their own, with whatever support
yeah.
that the person requires.
Yeah, and that sounds like a huge task that you happen to be taking, I think. I mean, it sounds.
Well, I mean, it is huge. Yeah, I totally agree. Yeah, but I mean, we're all doing our bits. I think this is one of the things that we often sort of talk about is that, I mean, this can't happen until there is like some kind of a tectonic shift, right?
Yeah,
In our society, and that begins right from our perceptions about mental health, right? Mental illness and quote unquote what we call madness or irrationality. I think it needs to start from that very basic sort of fundamental premise. And I think there are so many players involved. There's family, there's community, there's mental health sort of professionals, there's law enforcement officials, there's the government, there's the bureaucracy, there's civil society, there's schools, there's like everybody has a stake in this, right? And until that change happens everywhere, one person or one organization or one institution can't do it. It needs to be a movement.
yeah. I mean, but like talking about institutions and changing that and changing perceptions, one of the acts also mentions these institutions of Ayurveda, yoga, naturopathy, homeopathy, all of that. I mean, as relevant for the mental health space in India. But and I understand that because I feel like It does come from a space which we have disregarded for a very long time, and pseudoscience has also come into the conversation. But do you think there's any benefit from that, from including these institutions in the act?
Well, I mean, I don't know if there's a benefit or not. I mean, there is research which shows that some of these alternative systems don't work and that they're bogus. For example, there's a lot of
Yeah,
research about homeopathy, which basically
I
says that,
agree.
it's it's a pseudoscience, or it's not even science.
Hmm.
So I'm really not in a position to sort of vouch for their validity or not. I can only say what some of the research which says, which is out there on some of these sort of systems, alternative systems of care. But I suppose, I suppose the reason why it's there in the act is because, one, of course, there is a huge push from the government to promote,
Yeah.
some of these alternative systems of health. There is an Ayush ministry, right, which
Yes,
has been saying a
exactly
lot
what
of
happened.
interesting
Why I
things
brought it up.
about COVID-19. And yeah, anyway, so I think that's a whole different debate, and I don't want to get
Yes.
into that right now because then we're going to get super distracted.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, so I think I'm not someone who will vouch for this. In fact, I would say even allopathy has not been able to really crack the whole issue of mental health and illness
Mm.
because there's so many debates around medication itself, right? And there are so many conflicting positions about whether medication is harmful or is it not. Does it have any positive impact or not? There are people who've taken complete anti-psychiatric positions or completely anti-medication. There are people who are completely pro-medication, and there are some who are in between the spectrum, saying it really depends on the individual in terms of what works for them. And I think they should be able to decide with whatever support they require in terms of what are. Of course, they need to be provided those choices and those facilities and those services, because in the absence of that, what choice are you going to make or what decision are you going to make? But ultimately, I think people need to decide what works best for them, because what works for me might not work for you.
Yeah.
And yeah, so that's really how complicated this whole space is.
I mean, it's funny that people we're so used to recommending therapy to everyone. Like whenever they have extreme distress that's not manageable, and for some people it just doesn't work. Like some people just straight up say therapy doesn't do anything for me, and perhaps like some other thing might, which is a healthy coping mechanism. But yeah, I mean, it's interesting to see how, like you said, like to each zone, and I don't think in psychology anything is one fits all.
Marx kind of talked about this whole idea
Mm.
of the individual and the social structure being in this
Yeah.
dialectical relationship, right? So it's like it's that dialectical relationship. You can't separate the two. You have to consider the individual in the social context that they live in and how that social context has shaped them. You have to consider social determinants. You have to consider issues such as discrimination, poverty,
Mhm.
unemployment, all of those things. And you have to also consider macro sort of factors like policies and laws, and institutions, and what kind of policies and laws do they have, and what impact does that have on the individual, and does it discriminate against them? Does it treat them unfairly as opposed to others? So I think there's so many facets to this. It's interesting that you mentioned about this whole idea about therapy not working for some people. Recently,
Yeah.
there's this research which has been coming out about how mindfulness, which has suddenly
Mhm.
taken this boom.
Yeah.
There's an industry around it now about how mindfulness is now apparently can negatively impact people, right? And can actually worsen their situations, like people who are experiencing anxiety or depression or suicidal ideation, right? Whereas mindfulness is seems to be like the one thing which is recommended everywhere. When you talk about self-care,
I've
the
been
first thing
trying.
is be mindful, right? Doesn't work that way. It doesn't work that way. So I think we need people who are trained in therapeutic modalities, and I think a good therapist or a good psychiatrist or a good psychologist or a good caregiver knows what is right for that person, right? Through training and through experience. Both of these are equally important. It's just not enough to read theories and books. You need to be able to work with people to understand how people respond and then respond to them accordingly.
Yeah, I mean, I'm so worried now about the mindfulness fact because I have been after my life, like myself, that I have to practice it, and I try to meditate every day. But like I've also been told, since I have anxiety and I mean issues with anxiety, about how it can be a problem for me as well. So I mean, I'll have to research on this now. But there are two things that have happened in the past year. They have been happening for years, but they've taken like a center stage in these months. One is conversion therapy, and two is suicide. And it's sad that it's happening, but it's also something that's being talked about, which is good at this point of time. So I mean, there's when we talk about institutions, so Patanjali has claimed to have cured homosexuality, and we see these statements all across. So with regards to the act, how does the act go about a conversion therapy, and also after decriminalizing suicide, what other responsibilities does it undertake? And I do think, I mean, we've seen the interlinkages between the two and how badly it affects a person. But like in general, what is the act doing to deal with these two issues?
Sure. I mean, it's interesting. You also raised this question, raised the question of pseudoscience before, and I think this is the dangers of pseudoscience. That uh, a whole lot of rubbish, if I may say so, gets passed off in the name of science or healthcare, and we've seen this issue of pseudoscience extending beyond just mental health. We've seen this over the last 5 to 6 years about all kinds of spurious claims about things like even Gaumutra sort of curing COVID, and all kinds of ridiculous things like that. So
Very
um,
much used in my locality, by the way.
yeah. I mean, of course, there's a market for this, So there
Yeah.
are people out there who are buying this and consuming it and genuinely believe in it, which is why I think it's all the more important for scientific research to debunk these myths, to kind of shoot down these pseudoscientific claims, and to really kind of to counter this sort of crap which is floating around and sort of deceiving people and leading to all kinds of terrible outcomes, including Patanjali's ridiculous claim of curing homosexuality. So yeah, as far as conversion therapies is concerned, I think so. In that sense, the Mental Health Care Act sort of does make conversion therapies illegal. Um, and I will tell you how. So, if you look at Section 106 of the Mental Health Care Act, it says that any mental health professional or medical practitioner, including Ayurvedic, homeopathic practitioners who are registered under the Act or otherwise, who claim to be
Okay.
sort of Ayurvedic doctors or homeopathic doctors, cannot prescribe or recommend any form of treatment which is not authorized by their field of profession. Okay.
Okay.
Now, when it comes to conversion therapies, you've had various authoritative bodies across the world, in fact, and not just India, such as the American Psychiatric Association, the Indian Psychiatric Society, the Indian Association of Clinical Psychologists, the Indian Association of Psychiatric Social Workers. All of these bodies have now come out and said that conversion therapies are unethical, they're illegal, they cause more harm. They cause harm, in fact, and they actually create mental health problems in people, such as depression, anxiety, including suicidal ideation, and in some cases, even suicide, like we saw in the case of Anjana Harish. And yeah, so basically, all of them have come out and said that conversion therapies have no scientific basis, and that there is nothing to cure. Most importantly, there's nothing to cure in homosexuality or people who are identify with different genders. So by that sort of standard, and according to Section 106 of the Mental Health Care Act, today in India, if any medical practitioner or mental health professional is practicing or prescribing or recommending any form of conversion therapy to cure homosexuality or persons who are identifying with other genders, then they are liable to be prosecuted and subject to disciplinary proceedings, right, under the Mental Health Care Act. So that's the position on conversion therapies right now. I think what needs to be done is we need to create some precedents, right? So of course, one of the things that we need to do is call out practitioners who are still doing this. Some of them do it openly. Okay, I've come across practitioners. There's this one particular person from Chennai who actually had YouTube videos talking about basically soliciting clients for conversion therapies.
Mhm.
So one has to sort of call them out, name and shame them. And I think there needs to be a legal precedent, which means that we need to come forward, file complaints, before the state mental health authority or the mental health review boards under the Mental Health Care Act, which whenever they are set up, and file these complaints and initiate proceedings against these practitioners. Because I think it's time that some of these precedents are created, which then which serve as an example for other practitioners, and then actually sort of try and kind of coax them into sort of giving up these completely unlawful, illegal, and unethical practices. Organizations need to come forward, or individuals, lawyers, activists need to come forward and support people from the community who wish to make these complaints, right, and provide them the legal assistance and the legal support,
Especially
and
the
legal
younger ones. I think the younger ones are very, very vulnerable because they're dependent on their parents and their families.
Absolutely, absolutely, and especially, I mean, they're in the most precarious situations, especially those who below the ages of 18, because technically their families are their legal guardians, right? So, how does someone who's below the age of 18 really sort of deal with this kind of a situation? And I think we need to think about ways and strategies where that kind of support can be provided. But yeah, I think it requires institutional or organizational backing. It's not easy, because
Yeah.
there are legal nuances and technicalities which are involved, and that support becomes very, very important. So I think we really need to now work in that direction, kind of think of strategies and ways in which we could kind of follow this up and create these precedents and provide the support that people need.
I'm really glad we had this. I think this was a very far, of course, it only scratched the surface. But I think this was definitely very, very fruitful. Sometimes this field and this work, by this work, I mean, especially like this intersection and this constant battle for more rights seems very disheartening. So, I mean, if you had to give like a message of hope or like a message of positive or like a light at the end of a tunnel kind of message to people listening, what would it be, if anything?
I think we're in a much better position than we ever were as far as mental health is concerned. Even though, of course, the discourse in the media over the last few months has really taken us back, but I do feel what's really good to see is that people are definitely speaking more and more about this. I think there's a lot more awareness and discussion and discourse around mental health, and there are different perspectives coming on board, and most importantly, there are people coming. There is a lot of representation of voices from marginalized communities and groups who are really talking about their lived experiences and their own conceptions and understandings of what mental health is and how it must be understood and dealt with, specific to those spaces of marginalization and discrimination, that they're coming from. And we're also speaking at the same time about how privilege and people coming from privileged caste backgrounds also need to start thinking about their own privilege and be more mindful of uh, you know uh, how their privilege is actually affecting or marginalizing others. So I think some of these conversations are happening, which is great. I think we need more and more lived experiences to come out, people to share their own experiences of their own journeys of mental health, mental illness, or for that matter, even suicide. Coming back to your question about a positive message, I think these conversations are happening. I think that's great. I think what's also interesting is that there is so much more discussion around the Mental Health Care Act, especially amongst uh, youth organizations and young people and youth advocates. Mental health law was never something which was seen as that. Which it never figured in conversations and discussions as much. But what's really interesting is now that people are speaking about it, and I think they're also understanding the importance of this law. So we've got a legal framework. I think that's the good news. I think conversations are happening. The discourse is changing slowly, but it is changing. I think we just need to take action. I think we need to really do a lot of advocacy with the government, with communities, with families, with mental
Yeah.
health professionals, and we need to really think of um, what are some of the alternative models that we can create for support and care, especially in the era of COVID and this pandemic, because things have changed so drastically for all of us, and just make some meaningful impact on each other's lives. I mean, that's more than enough. We don't have to change the world. I think that's how change happens bit by bit. When things get aggregated is when you see large scale social change happening. So I think yeah, I'm optimistic, and I'm confident that things will get better, and yeah, there's so much to be done now. So I think
Yeah.
that's really the exciting thing about this.
I think that's where I'm going to end our podcast on. That was a great way to encapsulate it. Thank you so much, Arjun. I think that with this podcast, I mean, in the internship there was a limited set of people, but with this, we really, really hope that to people who have access to podcasts, who have access to the language, and all of these streaming sites, they can have a listen to the Mental Health Care Act as not a lecture, as not something that they zone out of, but something that truly interests them and also affects them in various areas of their lives. So, thank you for giving us your time. Thank you for joining me.
Sure. Thank you so much, Devyani, for inviting me to your space, your little space, and it was an absolute pleasure. And yeah, I'm sort of happy to kind of engage with young people and groups and communities, and take this work forward. So thanks very much for having me over. This is good fun and really interesting, and I'm glad we could speak about so many things.